My husband hired my sister as our nanny. Then they vanished together. My husband called it a practical solution. He said it with that tone, half tender, half strategic, that he often used when convincing me of things. Your sister needs a place to stay. We need help with the kids. It's perfect. And on paper, it was. Eliza had just graduated with no job prospects and mounting student loans. We had 2 toddlers and I was drowning trying to juggle part-time work, laundry, and sleepless nights. The idea of having someone we trusted under the same roof seemed like a godsend. Besides, Eliza and I'd always been close, closer than most sisters even, so we moved her in. It started simply. She took the guest room, the one next to the nursery. I helped her unpack. We laughed over old clothes she never wore and the books she refused to part with. She'd always had a dreamy, distracted look, like she was half living in a storybook. That first night, after the kids went to bed, we shared a bottle of wine and curled up on the couch, watching a terrible romantic comedy. My husband Marcus sat across from us, smiling, occasionally laughing at the movie's absurdities. It felt warm, whole, like family. By the second week, Eliza had taken to the routine beautifully. She sang songs to the kids during bath time, made them little crafts with pipe cleaners and glitter. She had a gift with them, a patience I hadn't seen in myself for a long time. Marcus started coming home earlier, saying he loved the smell of dinner cooking and the sound of the kids laughing. Sometimes, the 3 of them would be outside, playing tag in the backyard when I pulled into the driveway after work. I'd stand there for a second watching, smiling, grateful. Of course, I noticed small things at first. Nothing alarming, just a softness in how Marcus spoke to her, like they shared a secret language of inside jokes. And Eliza started dressing differently, nothing inappropriate, just more effort. Lip gloss, curled hair, little heels instead of her usual slippers. I chalked it up to confidence. She was, after all, in a better place. One evening I walked in on them sitting at the kitchen table. Eliza had flour on her nose, and Marcus was laughing, showing her how to knead dough properly. Their hands were nearly touching. When they noticed me, they sprang apart, too quickly, too forced. I laughed it off then, teasing, "What's this, a baking class?" But the way Eliza avoided my eyes stayed with me. Still nothing was concrete, and the truth is, I didn't want to see anything wrong. After years of being sleep-deprived and stretched thin, I had a sliver of breathing room. My children were thriving. My husband seemed lighter. My sister had purpose. Life wasn't perfect, but it felt manageable. One afternoon, I overheard Eliza humming in the hallway, a tune my husband often whistled. I paused, frozen by the familiarity of it, then shook it off. What a strange thing to fixate on. Looking back, I realized I had started negotiating with my instincts. I explained away the pauses, the glances, the way they avoided being alone in the room when I entered. They're just close, I told myself. They're family. But cracks were forming in the silence between us. One night, I walked into the living room and saw Marcus pull his hand away from Eliza's wrist just as I entered. She looked at me and said, "I was just telling him about the park incident with Emma." Her voice trembled just slightly. Marcus's eyes didn't meet mine. I nodded slowly and sat down. My heart was thudding, but I didn't say a word. In the quiet that followed, I convinced myself it was nothing. There's a particular kind of unease that settles into your bones, not like fear, not like sadness, but something quieter. A suspicion that hovers behind everyday moments, turning even smiles into something uncertain. That's what those first few weeks with Eliza felt like after the odd glances started. Nothing explosive, nothing I could point to and say, "This is wrong." But everything just a little off. I began to notice how quiet the mornings were when I came down the stairs. Eliza would already be in the kitchen making coffee. Marcus would be there too, reading something on his phone, but they wouldn't be speaking. Yet the air between them felt recently broken, like a conversation had just ended the moment they heard my footsteps. She'd smile at me too quickly. He'd mumble a good morning without looking up. One day, Eliza was doing puzzles with our daughter when Marcus came home early. I was upstairs folding laundry. I heard the door creak, the kid squeal his familiar "Hey, little monsters," then Eliza's laugh, light, musical, and then a pause, too long, no footsteps, no shuffling, just silence. I walked down slowly, holding a towel in one hand. When I entered the living room, they were sitting apart, as if distance meant innocence. "Laundry break?" I said, raising the towel in mock surrender. They both smiled. But Marcus's ears were red, and Eliza suddenly remembered she had to check on dinner. After that, I started watching them more closely. Not obviously. Just little things. How Eliza would straighten Marcus's tie before he left for work. How he'd call her Liz. Now, a nickname no one used. How she laughed more at his jokes than she ever did at mine. None of it was definitive, but it chipped away at my trust all the same. I told myself I was being paranoid. I tried to look at Eliza the way I always had. My baby sister who needed love and a place to belong. I reminded myself that Marcus was my husband, the man who had cried when I gave birth to our first child, The man who stayed up with me for 2 nights straight when I had the flu, holding my hand through feverish dreams. But even in those reassurances, there was doubt. It grew when I started catching the glances. They were never long, never openly affectionate, just flickers. Her eyes lingering on him when he wasn't looking. Or his gaze trailing her out of a room just a second too long. One night I walked into the kitchen to grab a glass of water. The lights were off and I thought everyone had gone to bed. But then I heard it, Eliza's voice, soft-hushed. "You said you wouldn't do this tonight." A pause. Marcus, equally low. "I didn't mean to, Then silence. I stood in the hallway paralyzed, the cold glass in my hand sweating. A moment later, I heard footsteps. I ducked into the pantry. Eliza walked by, not noticing me. Her face was pale, unreadable. That night I couldn't sleep. My mind kept replaying those words. What was he not supposed to do? What had she been trying to stop? In the morning, everything was normal again. Eliza served pancakes. Marcus kissed me on the cheek and helped pack the kids' lunchboxes. But when I looked at them, I couldn't see the people I loved. I saw strangers in familiar skin. The tipping point came a week later. I had a rare day off and decided to surprise everyone with lunch from their favorite cafe. I walked in earlier than expected, hoping to catch them mid-laughter, maybe singing with the kids. But the house was quiet. Too quiet. I checked the playroom empty. The kids were napping upstairs. Then I passed by the cracked door of the study. And through that narrow slice of visibility I saw Marcus sitting too close to Eliza. Their knees were touching. He had his hand on her arm, and she was leaning in, eyes closed. Not in sleep, not in thought, but in a way that said she was trying to gather courage. I backed away before they saw me. I didn't confront them. Not yet. I needed to be sure. I needed to protect the kids. But a storm had begun to gather in my chest. And the next time I saw Eliza, I smiled so wide it hurt my face. That night, I barely slept. I lay next to Marcus, listening to his even breathing, studying the shape of his back turned toward me. I reached out once, letting my fingers brush his shoulder. He stirred slightly, but didn't react. In the darkness, I felt both alone and absurd, watching my own life fall apart in slow motion and still hoping I was wrong. The days that followed were a fragile balancing act. I tried to observe without alarming them. I kept the routine exactly the same: smiles at breakfast, kisses before work, chit-chat over dinner. But inside, I was slipping into quiet madness. Then came the night that made everything undeniable. It was a Thursday. The kids had finally gone to sleep after what felt like an hour of negotiating bedtime stories and spilled water cups. Marcus was still at work, or so he said, stuck in a late meeting. Eliza was in her room, supposedly finishing a book she'd been obsessed with. I walked past her room on the way to mine and noticed something odd. Her door was ajar, the room empty, the window cracked open, the curtains fluttered like whispers. That's when I heard it, laughter, faint and breathless from downstairs. Not from the TV, not from the kids. From outside, I moved toward the back of the house, past the living room where the curtains were still pulled halfway open from earlier. And there, on the back patio, illuminated by the soft glow of the garden lights, were Marcus and Eliza. She was sitting on the bench. He stood in front of her. They were close, closer than they had ever been in front of me. Her head tilted back with laughter, his hand briefly resting on the back of her neck. It wasn't overtly intimate. But it wasn't innocent either. I stood frozen, the knot in my stomach tightening until I felt nauseous. Then Marcus said something too low for me to hear. Eliza's smile faltered. She looked away, her expression troubled. Then, without warning, she reached for his hand. He let her hold it. I backed away, unable to watch anymore. Every sound felt amplified, the creak of the floorboard, the thud of my own heartbeat. I made it back to my bedroom without alerting them. I lay in bed fully clothed, the ceiling a blur above me. A million scenarios played in my mind. Was I being overly dramatic, misinterpreting gestures? Was this grief in disguise, grief over a bond between sisters disintegrating? The next morning, neither of them acted any differently. Marcus kissed me goodbye like he always did. Eliza helped the kids pack their bags for daycare. She even made a joke about cereal monsters. I watched her hands. They didn't tremble. She didn't avoid my gaze. That's when it hit me. This wasn't an accident spiraling out of control. This was deliberate, controlled. Later that day, I checked Marcus's phone while he was showering. My hands shook as I unlocked it using the birth date I knew he always used. There weren't any incriminating messages. Nothing from Eliza, but I noticed a set of deleted texts in his thread with me, texts I had never seen. One said, "We need to be more careful." Another, simply, "You can't protect her from everything." My blood turned cold. Still, I couldn't accuse him. Not without real proof. Not without putting everything, my family, my children's sense of security at risk. That night, I tried again to talk to Eliza. I asked her if she was happy. She looked startled, then softened her face into something placid. "I'm grateful," she said. "It's nice, being part of something." Her words felt rehearsed. "Is there anything you want to talk about?" I asked, pushing gently. She hesitated. I know. I'm good, really. Thank you for everything. For a moment, I wanted to believe her. I wanted to believe I was imagining all of it. But then she added, sometimes I think people see things that aren't there. I froze. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. That night I lay awake again. But not from doubt. This time, I was preparing myself. Because I finally understood it wasn't just about betrayal. It was about the quiet unraveling of everything I had built. I was folding laundry when it happened, something small, almost silly, that cracked everything wide open. Eliza had told me she was taking the kids to the park. Marcus was working late again. It was a regular Tuesday, nothing special, but when I texted her around 4 p.m. to ask if they'd be home for dinner, she didn't respond. A few hours passed. Still no reply. Then Marcus walked through the door. Early, he looked surprised to see me. Didn't expect you to be home already, he said, setting down his bag. I took the afternoon off. I replied, thought I'd surprise the kids? He paused. They're at the park with Eliza, right? I nodded slowly. Yeah. Still no reply though. I texted her around 4. He pulled out his phone, scrolling for a moment, then looked up. She probably just lost track of time. His voice was too calm, rehearsed. Something in me hardened. Where's your car? I asked. He blinked. Huh. You usually take the car to work. It's not in the driveway? Oh. Right. I took a rideshare today. Didn't feel like driving. It was a flimsy excuse. Marcus loved driving. He always said it cleared his head. I walked into the kitchen, heart racing, and opened the drawer where we kept spare keys. Eliza's set was gone. I checked the coat hooks, her jacket, too. I didn't say anything then. I couldn't. I had to be sure. The kids came home an hour later. Eliza's hair was slightly wet, as if she'd just showered. The kids were tired, fussy. She smiled as though nothing was wrong. That night, I waited until everyone was asleep and checked the car's GPS history. I'd forgotten that Marcus had once installed a tracking app after his keys were stolen. The last location, a private apartment complex across town. Parked there for over an hour in the middle of the day. My stomach dropped. The next morning, I confronted Eliza casually over breakfast. Hey, did you take the kids to Ridgeview Park yesterday? I asked, pretending to butter toast. She blinked. Of course. They love the swings there? Interesting, I said. I thought you went to Meadowfield. One of the moms said she saw you there. Her face stiffened a second, just a flicker. Oh, yeah, we actually went to both, I said, nodding slowly. With Marcus? She dropped her fork. What? I mean, I smiled tightly. I mentioned you all spent the afternoon together. Her face went pale. She stood abruptly, muttered something about laundry, and left the room. Later that day, I called Marcus's office. His assistant said he hadn't been in since Monday, claimed he was working remotely all week. That was the final confirmation. They were lying to me. Both of them? Carefully, together? Still, I didn't scream. I didn't accuse. I played the role of the unsuspecting wife one more night. I needed to see it, really see it for myself. So the next morning, I dropped the kids at daycare, called in sick to work, and followed Eliza. She left around 10, said she was going to the grocery store. Instead, I watched her drive across town to the same apartment complex I'd found in the GPS history. She parked, got out, looked around, then entered one of the buildings with a key. 10 minutes later, Marcus walked up and went inside too. I sat in my car for nearly an hour, the engine off, watching the entrance. When they emerged, they didn't hold hands. But they walked close, her arm brushed his. They spoke quietly, then he kissed her on the forehead before heading in the opposite direction. I didn't cry, not yet. I drove home in silence, every beat of my heart echoing like thunder in my chest. At home, I opened my laptop and printed every document I'd need: financial records, childcare rights, custody paperwork. I wasn't ready to file yet, but I would be, soon. That evening, I sat at the dinner table with both of them, smiling, pouring wine, laughing at Marcus's jokes, and inside, I was a storm waiting to break. It was supposed to be a simple weekend away. My parents had called earlier in the week, saying they missed the kids and wanted us to come visit. Marcus said he had to work. Eliza said she had a cold. So it ended up being just me and the little ones, a 2-hour drive and a few days of home, cooked meals and familiar warmth. I remember the way my mother hugged me that Friday evening. Her embrace lingered longer than usual, as if she could feel the tension vibrating beneath my skin. She asked if I was okay. I smiled and said I was tired, that life was just a little overwhelming. I didn't tell her that I had followed my husband and my sister into a lie so deep I couldn't see the bottom. I didn't tell her that everything she had taught us about family and trust was unraveling around me. That weekend, I tried to enjoy the peace. The kids played with their grandparents. I helped Dad in the garden. Mom made apple pie. It was quiet, grounding. But something inside me churned, constantly restless. I checked my phone every hour, looking for something, anything. None from Eliza. I texted once, just a simple, all good at home. No response. By Sunday afternoon, I was anxious to return. I told my parents we needed to get an early start. The drive back felt longer. The kids fell asleep in their car seats. I had time to imagine everything I feared, and even things I hadn't dared consider. When we finally pulled into the driveway, the house looked off. Still, lifeless, as if the air around it had been drained. I unlocked the front door and stepped inside. Silence. Marcus? I called. Nothing. Eliza, still nothing. The kids were groggy, confused. I settled them on the couch with snacks and quietly walked through the house. Bedroom, empty. Guest room, neatly made, untouched. Eliza's suitcase was gone. Her shoes, her books, even the small ring dish on her dresser, empty. Panic set in as I ran to our bedroom. His clothes were gone, the top drawers cleaned out. Our photo from the night we got engaged, the one that sat by his side of the bed, gone. So was the watch I gave him for our 5th anniversary. In the bathroom, his razor and cologne were missing. The closet door hung open like a gaping mouth. I ran back downstairs and opened the office. Files were scattered. One of the desk drawers had been forced open. I reached for my phone and opened the banking app. 0. Our joint savings account had been emptied. The small emergency fund I kept in a separate account, also gone. Transfers authorized with his login. I couldn't breathe. My fingers were trembling so violently I dropped the phone. The children were giggling at a cartoon, blissfully unaware. In the kitchen, I searched for a note, anything, a message, an explanation, nothing. I checked the fridge. It was half empty. Someone had taken things selectively, snacks, water bottles, a few favorite meals I had prepared in bulk. This wasn't spontaneous. They had planned this. I called Marcus's phone, straight to voicemail. I called Eliza, disconnected. I sank to the floor, numb. I stared at the blank space on the wall where our family calendar used to be. That was gone, too. They didn't want me to know where they were going. I sat there for hours, frozen. Eventually, I called my mom. I told her everything. She cried. I didn't. There was nothing left to cry about. I spent the next 48 hours in a fog of disbelief. Sleep came in short bursts, punctuated by the nightmare of waking up to reality. I walked through the house like a ghost, tidying up toys, washing dishes I barely remembered using, folding the same blanket over and over. The kids asked when Daddy and Auntie Eliza would be back. I didn't know what to say. I told them they were on a trip, and left it at that. They seemed to accept it, distracted by cartoons and snacks, but I knew that wouldn't hold for long. On the 3rd morning, I sat at the dining room table, staring at my laptop. I opened every account I could think of, banking, insurance, email. I needed answers and I needed control. The first discovery. Marcus had withdrawn nearly 36 zlotys from our joint accounts over the course of a month. Small amounts at first, 500 here, 300 there, then a single massive transaction 2 days before we left for my parents' house. Gone. Next, I checked his email. I tried the password he always used for everything. It didn't work. Password changed. I tried his old backup email. It had been deleted. Eliza's email was deactivated too. Her phone number had been reassigned. It was like they had evaporated, 2 lives carefully scrubbed from existence. I filed a police report, not to accuse them of a crime yet, but to create a record. A paper trail. The officer at the station was kind if skeptical. Do you think they're in danger? He asked. I hesitated. No, I think they ran away. He nodded slowly. With your money? I nodded. He took notes, asked questions I could barely answer, and then gave me a case number. The detective assigned to the report called me a week later. She was blunt. They've taken great care to disappear. Rented cars, prepaid phones, cash withdrawals only. No clear direction. She paused. You were right to come in. But don't expect miracles. She was right. Each day that passed, it became clear that they had been planning this for weeks, maybe months. I retraced everything in my memory. Whispers behind closed doors, days Marcus had come home late, Eliza's quick goodbyes and rushed errands. Every memory now felt like a lie. The kids kept asking. I kept lying. I thought about telling them the truth, but how do you explain something like this to a 3-year-old and a 5-year-old? How do you tell them that their father left without saying goodbye, that their aunt stole more than money? I started having panic attacks. At night, I'd jolt awake, gasping for air, convinced I'd heard the front door open. I checked every lock twice. I kept the lights on in the hallway. Eventually, I stopped checking my phone for messages. Eventually, I stopped hoping they'd come back. And then, 3 days later, I found the note. It was tucked under my pillow, folded, handwritten, familiar loops of ink. I stared at it for a long time before opening it. It was from Eliza. I'm sorry. I didn't mean for it to happen like this. I was lost. You always had everything figured out, and I was just drifting. Marcus saw me, really saw me. I didn't plan this. But then it happened, and we didn't know how to stop. I hope one day you'll understand. I love you. I always will. I read it 3 times, and then I tore it up. She hadn't left it when she disappeared. She had come back, let herself into my house, slipped into my bedroom while I slept, stood over me while I lay unaware. That was what broke me. Not the betrayal, not the money, But the fact that she'd been here and still chose to leave. After that, something in me changed. I stopped hoping. I started surviving. In the days following the discovery of the note, I moved through life like someone newly reborn into grief. I did everything that needed to be done, but the world no longer felt safe. Every room in the house whispered memories. Every creak in the floorboards was a ghost. And the space beside me in bed felt impossibly wide. I memorized the words Eliza wrote even as I tried to forget them. Marcus saw me, really saw me. I hated that line the most, not because of the betrayal, but because I understood what she meant. I had once felt the same way about him. I kept the children close. I dropped them at daycare late, picked them up early. I ignored calls unless I recognized the number. I told friends that Marcus had taken a sabbatical and that Eliza had moved out for personal reasons. No one pressed me. Maybe they already suspected the truth. I began working with a private investigator, a recommendation from a lawyer friend. His name was Ron, gruff voice, weathered eyes, the kind of man who'd seen it all and wasn't impressed by much. I gave him everything I had: timelines, phone records, bank statements, the torn-up pieces of the note, even my memory of that strange apartment complex address. Ron nodded as I spoke, scribbling notes. "They're laying low," he said. This wasn't impulsive. The first real lead came 2 weeks later. Ron had traced a string of motel stays under an alias, Mark Elson, a lazy variation on Marcus's name, cash payments, short stays, always 2 adults, no children. One motel clerk described the woman as having long hair and sad eyes. It was Eliza. From there, we built a pattern. They were hopping towns, staying just long enough to avoid suspicion, always paying in cash, no paper trails, no friends, no credit cards. Ron was patient, thorough. He explained they were likely using prepaid cell phones, changing them every few weeks. No social media activity, no digital presence. That, more than anything, stunned me. Marcus had once been obsessed with online updates, posting every family outing, every homemade dinner. He used to write me long Facebook messages on our anniversary. Now, he'd vanished into the analog world. I started dreaming about them. Not nightmares, worse. Dreams where they came back, laughing, apologizing, everything returned to normal. Dreams where Eliza hugged me, crying, saying it had all been a mistake. That she missed me. That she missed the kids. And then I'd wake up to silence. I found myself whispering to pictures, framed memories I hadn't yet taken down. "How could you?" I asked one night, touching a photo of Marcus holding our son in the hospital, tears in his eyes. "How long were you lying to me?" There were no answers. The children stopped asking where they were. They accepted the lie, or maybe they forgot the shape of the truth. Sometimes I'd catch them playing a game, using their dolls to mimic conversations. "Bye, I'll see you later." "No, don't go. I have to, sorry." I'd turn away, heartbreaking. I began therapy. My therapist, Lena, was calm and kind. She didn't ask me to forgive. She asked me to remember who I had been before the betrayal. "You are more than what happened to you," she said. "But first, you have to grieve the version of your life that died." I nodded. That version had died the moment I came home to an empty house. Weeks turned to months. My routine solidified. I filed for legal separation. The court issued a temporary custody order, even though Marcus hadn't contacted me once. Legally, he was still their father, but practically, he had vanished. One morning, I received a letter from our joint insurance provider. It had been canceled. I laughed, loud and bitter. Even his disappearance was administrative. It took 4 months to piece together their trail. 4 months of digging through records, tracing aliases, following blurry motel security photos, and cross-referencing vehicle rentals. Ron, bless his persistence, compiled a map. Each pin was a town where they'd briefly stayed. Each note included dates, witness statements, cash withdrawals. They had been moving in wide arcs through rural areas, never staying longer than 2 weeks. Marcus had purchased a used white SUV under a fake name, no loan, no registration flag, paid in cash. It was the kind of vehicle that could blend into any suburban driveway unnoticed. They were methodical, but they slipped once. Ron called me one afternoon, his voice unusually alert. "We have something." Small town convenience store an hour south of here. Security footage caught Eliza buying groceries. Guess who's behind her in line? He sent me the footage. It was grainy, time-stamped from a Tuesday evening. Eliza stood at the register, head down, hair pulled into a ponytail, holding a few bags of rice and canned soup. Behind her, Marcus, wearing sunglasses indoors, his posture tight. He wasn't touching her. But they were there. Together, the transaction matched a cash withdrawal made the same day, logged at a nearby ATM. My hands shook as I paused the video, zooming in on Eliza's face. She looked older, tired, but calm. A few days later, Ron called again. "I think I found where they're headed. A coastal town 3 hours upstate." He used the same alias to rent a P.O. box there. That's sloppy. It's the first official trace in over a month. We planned a trip. I didn't tell anyone, especially not my parents. I knew what they'd say. Let the past stay buried. Protect your peace. Don't go reopening wounds. But I needed closure. Even if it broke me all over again, I had to see it for myself. We drove in silence. The small town was quiet, idyllic, seagulls overhead, pastel storefronts lining a single main street. Ron pointed to a little cafe with a chalkboard sign out front. Fresh pastries, strong coffee, good conversation. They bought it together, he said. Cash down payment, limited liability company registered to a shell name. We parked down the block. I walked toward the cafe like someone walking toward a grave. The bell above the door jingled softly. The place smelled of espresso and cinnamon. A few customers sat scattered about, elderly locals. A teenager on her phone. Behind the counter stood Marcus. He looked up. For one full second, his face remained unreadable. Then his eyes widened and color drained from his skin. I said, barely above a whisper. He didn't move. Didn't speak. From the kitchen, Eliza emerged carrying a tray of muffins. She stopped mid-step. Time collapsed between us. The cafe went silent. I stared at them. At the man I married. At the sister I grew up with. At the new life they had built from the wreckage of mine. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I turned and walked out. Ron followed. Back in the car, I stared at the sea. They look a guy. I began but couldn't finish. Ron finished for me. Guilty. Scared. And like they've aged 10 years. I nodded. Closure wasn't always loud. Sometimes it was a silent room, a single look, and the knowledge that the past had truly ended. I didn't go back into the cafe. But they knew I'd been there, and that was enough. Explaining abandonment to a child is like trying to define wind. You can describe its effects, but not its essence. After I returned from the seaside town, something shifted in me. I no longer fantasized about confrontation or apology. I'd seen them. I'd seen how their lives had bloomed from the ashes of mine. That was the end of the story, for me. But for my children, the questions were just beginning. Why doesn't Daddy call me anymore? When is Auntie coming back? Their voices were small, hesitant, like they already sensed the answers would hurt. I tried to keep my answers gentle. Sometimes grown-ups make choices that aren't fair. Sometimes people go away, even when they shouldn't. It wasn't enough. Of course it wasn't. My son stopped drawing pictures of our family. He used to sketch us in stick figures. Mommy, Daddy, him, and his sister, sometimes with Eliza holding a balloon. Now, he drew only himself and his sister. Sometimes just himself. My daughter began waking up crying in the middle of the night. I dreamed Daddy forgot me, she whispered once, curling into my lap. I held her close and tried not to sob. I met with a child therapist. She advised me to stay honest but age-appropriate. Don't create fantasies, she warned. They'll need the truth eventually. Shape it gently, but don't lie. So I started rewriting our bedtime stories. In them, the heroes were brave, abandoned children who learned to find strength inside themselves. They built castles from sadness, made shields from truth, and found peace in places no one thought to look. One night, after I read them a new story, my son asked, "The story about us?" "Yes," I said. "In a way. Do the parents ever come back?" I hesitated, then answered, "Not always." He nodded slowly, as if something in him already knew. I began to notice how the absence of their father and Eliza reshaped their days. At school, my daughter drew hearts only around her friends' names, not her family. At birthday parties, she clung to me, afraid I would disappear too. My son grew quieter, more careful. Like he was afraid of breaking something else. I saw the wound in their smiles, the invisible scar of abandonment. I reached out to Marcus once, just one message. I used a burner phone and sent it through a secure app. "They're hurting. Say something, not to me, to them." He read it. The scene notification blinked. He never replied. That silence was the cruelest thing he ever did. I never messaged again. The court eventually processed our divorce. His absence made it easy. No contest, no claim to custody. The judge awarded me full legal rights. Still, I kept his name on paper. For now, because I didn't want to complicate the children's records at school. But in my heart, he was already gone. I told the kids the truth one night. I said, "Daddy and Auntie Eliza made a choice. It wasn't the right one, but we're still a family." They didn't cry. They just looked at me, eyes too old for their age, and nodded. That night, they both slept in my bed, and I lay there in the dark, watching their small bodies rise and fall with breath, knowing I would carry this grief for them, for as long as I had breath to give. Nearly a year had passed since they left when I saw them again. The town where they'd opened their cafe had faded from my memory, or maybe I'd buried it on purpose. But fate, in its strange symmetry, brought me back. It was spring break. I took the kids on a road trip, just the three of us. We drove along the coast, stopping at beaches and quiet towns, chasing sunsets, breathing fresh air. It was the first time I felt something like peace blooming in our lives again. We weren't supposed to stop in that town. It was a whim, a wrong turn, a bathroom break. I parked near a little market square and led the kids toward a cafe with an open patio and the smell of croissants in the breeze. I didn't realize where we were until I saw the chalkboard sign, fresh pastries, strong coffee, good conversation. I froze. The kids tugged at my hand, eager for snacks. Inside, it was exactly as I remembered: soft lighting, rustic tables, quiet music. A woman behind the counter greeted us with a smile. She wasn't Eliza. A teenage boy brought Minas, not Marcus. I glanced toward the back, just in case, and then they appeared. Marcus first, emerging from the kitchen, wiping his hands on a towel. His hair was longer, flecked with gray at the temples. He looked thinner, worn. Then Eliza followed, carrying a tray of pastries. She saw me first. She stopped mid-step. The tray tilted in her hands. She caught it just in time. Marcus turned, saw me, and froze. Neither of them said a word. I met their eyes, first his, then hers. Eliza looked like she might cry. Marcus looked empty. The kids were at a table now, looking through a coloring menu. Blissfully unaware, I walked over. Close enough for a conversation, far enough to not cause a scene. Eliza spoke first. I didn't know you were here? I didn't plan to be. She opened her mouth, then closed it. Marcus stepped forward, voice low. Good. I didn't answer. He cleared his throat. How are the kids? They're healing. Slowly, his jaw clenched. I never wanted to hurt them, he said, voice tight. Or you. But you did. He nodded, shame flickering behind his eyes. They miss you? I said. Or at least the version of you that existed before this. I don't expect them to forgive me. They don't even talk about you anymore. That hit him hard. He staggered a bit, as if I'd physically struck him. Eliza stepped closer. I wrote letters, she whispered. I never sent them? I didn't know how? You had every opportunity to explain. You chose silence. Tears welled in her eyes. I was angry, she said. At the world, at myself, at you, for always having your life together. You think I had it together? She nodded. You had a home, a family, a future. I was just drifting. I took a deep breath, steadying myself. You stole my family to feel whole. Eliza flinched. Marcus looked away. I looked at them. These two people I once loved, now strangers with familiar faces. Their cafe, their carefully constructed lie of a life, sat around them like a stage set. Neorderly? Solace? I didn't come here to fight, I said. I didn't even come here on purpose. They said nothing. I turned to leave. Then I paused. Don't contact us? Not unless the kids ask for it. Not unless they're ready. I understand, Marcus murmured. I left the cafe and took my children's hands. We walked into the sunlight, into the noise of the market, into the world that was slowly becoming ours again. I didn't look back. It took a full week for the shock to wear off. After we returned home, I kept waiting for a message, a letter, a call, something. But true to my words, and perhaps for the first time in their lives, Marcus and Eliza honored a boundary. Silence. Total and complete. I thought it would bring me peace. Instead, it left me unsettled. One morning, about 2 weeks later, a letter arrived. No return address. The handwriting was unmistakable, Marcus's. I stared at it for hours before opening it. The envelope trembled in my hands like a live thing. Inside, only a single sheet of paper. His words were scrawled, not typed, raw. Unaven. I never meant to become what I became. That's the first lie I told myself, that I was still a good man. I was a coward. I ran. Not just from you, but from who I was with you. I felt small in your presence, useless, invisible. You were always stronger, steadier, kinder. I didn't fall in love with Eliza. I fell into a trap I made for myself. She was there. She looked at me like I mattered. But the truth is, I don't know if she really loved me, or if she just needed someone to cling to while drowning. When I saw you at the cafe, something cracked open in me. You looked exactly the same. But also, nothing like the woman I left. You had become something harder and freer. I will carry the weight of what I did for the rest of my life. I won't contact the children. I don't deserve to. But if they ever ask, please don't lie to them about me. Let them know I made mistakes. Let them hate me if they must. It's better than being forgotten. I hope you find someone who chooses you completely, who sees your strength and loves you for it. I was too weak to deserve it. I folded the letter and placed it in a box I kept in the back of my closet. Alongside it were the torn pieces of Eliza's note, the final bank statement before he emptied our account, and one of the last photos we took as a family before everything cracked. I didn't cry, but I did feel something like grief settling into a new shape inside me, less sharp, more resigned. Later that night, I told the kids a story. It was about a traveler who left behind a treasure because he was too scared to hold its weight. He wandered far, tried to build something new, but nothing he created felt whole. Meanwhile, the treasure learned to shine on its own even when no one came looking for it again. My daughter asked, "Was the treasure sad?" "Yes," I said, "but not forever." My son leaned against me, eyes heavy with sleep. "Did the treasure find someone new?" I kissed his forehead. "Not yet. But she will." And as I turned off the light, I thought, maybe I was ready to believe that too. There's a certain quiet that settles in after closure. Not the absence of sound, but the absence of waiting. That was the space I found myself in. No more wondering if they would return. No more hoping for an apology. They had spoken. Eliza with her trembling note, Marcus with his belated confession, and that was enough. I filed for divorce the following Monday. My lawyer was efficient. The paperwork was already drafted. With no contest from Marcus, it sailed through. Within 6 weeks, my marriage of 9 years was officially dissolved. I also requested to legally change my last name, not back to my maiden name, but something entirely new, my own. I wanted nothing that tied me to either of them. No trace of the man who abandoned his family, nor the sister who betrayed me in silence. I held the name change document in my hand like a declaration of independence, and then I blocked every number I could trace to them. Old, new, hypothetical. I updated privacy settings, moved money into new accounts, reset passwords. I even bought a new phone, a new number. I deleted the old one completely. It was like shedding a skin. The house still carried echoes of them. Eliza's favorite mug, Marcus's toolbox in the garage, family photos that once lined the hallway. One by one, I packed these items into boxes and placed them in the attic, not thrown away, just removed. I redecorated, not out of pettiness, but because I needed to make the space mine again. I painted the walls in soft hues, changed the bed sheets, bought new curtains, replaced the family dining table with a round one, less about corners, more about gathering. The kids notice. Everything feels different. My son said one morning. It's because we're starting new traditions. I told him. Just the 3 of us? My daughter liked that. She called us the adventure team. I smiled at the name. It stuck. We began cooking together. Saturday pancake mornings. Wednesday night dance parties in the living room. We made scrapbooks of our day trips. I gave them a jar where they could drop wishes and ideas. Some were silly, pet dinosaur. Others broke my heart. Never let mommy cry. They didn't know it, but they saved me. Their love, pure, untainted, rebuilt the parts of me I thought were lost. I took photos of us laughing. I framed them, put them where the old photos used to be. At first, it felt forced, a little performative. But over time, the joy became real. Not because we forgot, but because we chose to move forward anyway. One evening, I sat alone on the porch, sipping tea, watching them chase fireflies in the backyard. And for the first time since it all began, I felt something soft settle in my chest. Not peace, not yet, but promise. The promise of a life that was still mine to live. Free from the shadows of betrayal. Free from waiting for people who never planned to stay. 3 years have passed since the day I came home to an empty house. The storm they left behind no longer controls my days. It lingers, of course, like all old wounds do, but it no longer defines me. The children are growing. My daughter, now 8, is full of questions and boundless curiosity. My son, 10, is thoughtful and creative, a quiet observer of the world. They remember Marcus less now. His absence has morphed from ache into fact. He is simply gone. Not a villain, not a ghost, just someone who used to be here. They don't talk about Eliza anymore. In their minds, she belongs to a distant past, a name attached to a few fading photographs tucked in a drawer I haven't opened in years. Me? I've changed too. There is gray in my hair now. I leave it. I wear fewer masks. I speak my truth without softening the edges to protect others' comfort. I've learned to say no, to set boundaries, to choose myself. Some nights, I still wake up at 3 a.m. The silence reminds me of the night I found them gone. But instead of anxiety, I now feel resolve. I get up, check on the kids, make tea, sit by the window and breathe. I've started journaling again, and painting. I joined a community group for single mothers. I volunteer on weekends. I've even begun dating, not seriously, not yet, but slowly, carefully. A coffee here, a walk there. I've told my story only once, at a retreat where women sat in a circle and shared the things they thought would break them. I said mine aloud, voice steady. No tears. At the end, someone asked, "Do you still miss them?" "No," I said. "But I still carry what they took from me. And that's the truth. I don't forgive them. I don't hate them either. They were weak, they made their choices. And in doing so, they revealed their truth. That they were never capable of the love they pretended to give. But I was. And I still am. My children know what loyalty looks like. They know what love sounds like when it shows up every single day. They know what it means to be chosen, even when things are hard. That is what I gave them. That is what I rebuilt from the rubble. And that, more than anything else, is how I won. The above stories show the consequences and limits of family relationships. Sometimes, the deepest betrayals don't come from enemies, but from the people we once trusted with our entire hearts. From a husband who promised forever but couldn't stay. From a sister who once held your hand only to become the one who shattered your peace. Family should mean safety, commitment, and love. But when those bonds are broken by deceit and abandonment, the path forward becomes one of painful rebuilding. And yet, through grief there is healing. Through loss, there is clarity. And sometimes, through heartbreak, we discover our truest strength. Have you ever experienced something like this? We invite you to share your story in the comments. If this resonated with you, subscribe for more stories that explore the complex, beautiful, and sometimes devastating reality of family.